This video is the start of Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is talking about functions and their graphs. The first section in Chapter 1 is graphs and graphing utilities. This section hits two of our targets for the chapter, one dealing with graphing equations and the other one with determining intercepts. So make sure you pay special attention when those targets come up. Let's go ahead and get started. The first objective that we'll discuss is plotting points in the rectangular coordinate system. This should be a big review for you from your previous math courses. Remember that our points are written in the form x, comma, y. X is the horizontal axis, y is the vertical axis, and the point in the middle, remember we called the origin 0, 0. The biggest part that I want to talk about in this slide is how we name our quadrants, because this vocabulary will come up throughout this course. Our first quadrant is where x and y are both positive, and then we're going to go counterclockwise from there for quadrants 2, 3, and 4. Also pay special attention to the fact that we use Roman numerals to name our quadrants. One trick I like to use to help remember the order is that after I start in the top right, I make the letter C, and you can see again we go counterclockwise when counting. Now that we remember how to plot points, let's go ahead and move on. And now we are going to discuss how to actually graph equations using that idea. Now, you could possibly graph some of these equations if you remember your parent graphs from Algebra 2. If not, remember that a table of values is always a great place to start when you need to graph an equation. So I'm going to start with an XY table. When I do this, I get to choose the x values. I'm going to start with -2 and just go down by 2s, or I'm sorry, go up by 2s, so -2, 0, 2, 4, and 6. Now that I've chosen my x values, I'm going to take them and plug them into the x in my equation to calculate their y values. So for the first one, I'll do -2 minus 2. Remember, I'm going to take the absolute value of that. That'll be the absolute value of -4. And a quick reminder of absolute value is how far away from 0 you are, so the answer there is 4. Another trick is often that people remember the absolute value is always a positive number because it's talking about a distance. So we've got 4 for the y value that matches -2. I'm going to go on and do the same thing for all the rest of these. So for 0, we'll do 0 minus 2, which is -2, and the absolute value of -2 is +2. Why don't you pause your video and go ahead and try to fill in the rest of them, and then we'll check them to see how you did. Hopefully for the rest, you got 0 and 2, and then finally 4. And now that we have all of our values, we can go ahead and start plotting them on the graph. So the first point we're going to plot is -2, 4. Remember the x and the y axes are as labeled, and if we go ahead and count -2 in the x direction and 4 in the y direction, we get that point there. We'll continue and do the same for 0, 2, for 2, 0, 4, 2, and then 6, 4 is off the graph. It looks to me like we're getting a V shape here, which in my memory is correct for absolute value, so we'll go ahead and draw in that V. And then there's our graph for y equals the absolute value of x minus 2. So let's go ahead and move on. Now, in this objective, we are discussing just graphing utilities and viewing. Really the biggest part of this slide and the point of this slide is some notation that your book is going to use. You're often going to see what I highlighted here with the green box. You're going to see this notation in your textbook, and so I want you to understand what it means. What this notation is doing is it's giving you a viewing window. So the first set of numbers is dealing with the x-axis, the second set of numbers, the y-axis. Now the first two numbers are your smallest and biggest, so in this case we want the x-axis to go from -50 to 50. The third number is telling you how to scale, so in this case we want to scale by tens. So if we go ahead and put those onto the graph here, we're going to start at -50 and we're just going to go up by tens. So then we get -40, -30, -20, and it'll continue from there all the way to +50. We'll do the same thing on the y's, only this time we're going to start at -40, So then it goes negative 30 and on from there to positive 40. So again, the whole point of this is just to help you know some notation from your textbook. Some of you might also be recognizing that that's similar to the way that we put the viewing windows into our graphing calculators. And the last objective we're going to discuss today is finding intercepts. We're actually going to find these both graphically and using equations. And again, this is a target, so you want to pay special attention here. First, we want to remember that our x-intercept has a y-coordinate of 0 and our y-intercept has an x-coordinate of 0. So in order to find those graphically, we'll start with the x-intercept. We're going to go ahead and put 0 in for the y, so we get 0 equals x squared minus 4, and we'll solve for the x. We'll start by adding 4 to both sides. Then from there, we'll take the square root of both sides. Now remember, when you square root an x squared, your answer becomes the positive and negative solutions. So we get positive and negative 2 for our x-intercepts. If we take a look at the graph, we'll notice that that's exactly where our two x-intercepts were. So negative 2, 0, and 2, 0 are our x-intercepts. And we could have gotten those also just straight off this graph. In order to find the y-intercept, we'll do the same thing, only this time we're going to make the x value 0, so we get y equals 0 squared minus 4. Let's solve that, and we get y equals negative 4. Taking a look at the graph, you can also see that the y-intercept is negative 4 according to the graph, so we get 0, negative 4. Now obviously in this case, it would be a lot easier just to pull the intercepts off the graphs than solving the equations, but we want to make sure that we can do both of those. Moving on now, we have our free response question. Remember, you're going to answer this in your Google form, and there's a link there to the Google form if you need it, and also the QR code. So the first question, I want you to go ahead and answer this question in your notebook, and then you can put the answer into the Google form. When you're ready, go on to the next. This is the second question here, and it's our multiple choice question for our Google form. This is also where we'll be ending our video for today, so as soon as you're done with this question, you can go ahead and stop your video and put your answer in the Google form.